What is the relationship recovery process, also known as RRP? RRP is a group therapy model designed to help childhood trauma survivors. It is a structured, experientially based trauma group for people who grew up in dysfunctional families and as adults want to find a safe place to join with others to heal. The first goal of the group is to grieve the loss of a normal childhood and finish unresolved issues with one's parents through the use of structured, experiential exercises. The second goal is to reparent the inner child. Participants learn basic intimacy skills, conflict resolution skills, and ways of changing conditioned patterns of behavior. This modality was created by Amanda Curtin, licensed independent clinical social worker, and has been made famous by her mentee, Patrick Tehan, also a licensed independent clinical social worker. And today, I want to share my own experience doing a short-term RRP group from the patient's point of view. Hi, I am Raysa, a survivor of narcissistic abuse, and I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And you are listening to Hello Trauma Brain, a podcast where I share my experiences living with complex PTSD. My hope is this podcast can help destigmatize mental health and provide support to anyone diagnosed with CPTSD who thinks they might have it or has a loved one with this diagnosis. Quick reminder, I am not a licensed psychologist or mental health care professional, and this podcast is not meant to replace nor substitute the care of psychologists, other mental or medical health care professionals. If you think you might have complex PTSD or PTSD, please reach out to your primary care or mental health care provider. Any individuals or resources mentioned in this episode are not sponsoring Hello Trauma Brain. This episode may reference trauma or abuse, and listener discretion is advised. Remember, you can always pause or skip this episode at any time. And now, let's get back to the episode. Hello, dear survivors, and welcome to this episode of Hello Trauma Brain. Thank you for joining me today. So, quick check-in. It was a really hard week. I had a crisis, for sure. Quite frankly, it was a pretty severe emotional flashback. I better be outside. Excuse me, I'm gonna check. I'm gonna be brave and check. This check-in has been interrupted by a stink bug, a huge one that was crawling. It was on the other side of the window, like outside, but with the sun reflecting on that son of a gun. With the sun reflecting on the window through the shades, I couldn't tell if it was inside or not. Oh my gosh. I will admit something. I'm definitely experiencing less anxiety, and I think it might be medicine induced. Let me share that. So basically, because of the pain that I'm going to say at this point, suffering from. So my doctor recommended a new medication, and I will say the anxiety has been reduced by the medication. I think that's definitely a side effect from it. However, the depression, so bad. It's so bad. It has improved. I don't think that the medication created my emotional flashback. I think it aggravated the emotional flashback when it was happening. And it really felt like the best way I can describe it is I just didn't feel like myself. Not fully. And it was really bad this week. And it started getting better after I had I'm going to call it an emergency phone call with one of my therapists. And ever since then, I feel like it helped with the emotional flashback, which has helped reduce a lot of the feelings that I've been having. And I think that combined with my body adjusting to the medication, I'm starting to slowly find my way out of this mess. I also want to share, I just did an interview yesterday, and I have to say, I'm so excited for you to hear the conversation I just had. It left me feeling so recharged. And my guest used a word for it. She said she felt rejuvenated by the conversation we had, and that captures it. I'm so excited, and I am really fighting hard the urge to just start working hardcore on that episode. I mean, I have been technically, but I really thought for a moment maybe I should just try to release it as soon as possible. I don't want anyone to have to wait another day that they don't have to wait to hear this. And then I remembered that last season I kind of did that with the interviews. And so something I do with my interviews is I send them to my guest ahead of time, and I do not publish anything until they've had a chance to listen to it, give me feedback if they choose to. Some guests they don't want to listen to it, and that's okay. But the ones that choose to accept that invitation, yeah, I can edit it as fast as I can, but there is that period of waiting for the feedback to come, incorporating the feedback. And last season I kind of set myself up a little bit for a few freakouts with doing that and not recording like an episode backup to release in the meantime. And I'm so glad that yesterday at one point, while I was trying to figure out how to release this episode like ASAP, I remember that, and I was like, oh, wait a second, that's right. It's not just me. Like, this is a collaboration, so let's record a solo episode and keep doing that until the interview is fully, has fully run its course and is ready. And then I'm going to have these 2 episodes that I've already made. And it's going to feel great to have like 2 weeks of focusing just on the promo, basically. Okay, so today I want to kick off a new series. And I know I have so many series going on, and I will go back and add and build into some of the series that I have started. But I just love the concept of having series. And just an FYI, I honestly don't remember if I have said this here. Gosh, I should have said that here. Okay, let me reel myself back for a moment. I try to be as transparent and communicate as clearly with you and one of the reasons I do that so intentionally is because in narcissistic relationships, clear communication is just not a thing, and you're supposed to just know, and people are supposed to read each other's minds, and you don't say the thing and nobody talks about the thing. People act like the thing didn't happen, and there's this, when you're in that environment, there's a lot of second guessing. What is going on? Am I reading this correctly? I'm not sure what to do. I'm not sure where to find X, Y, and Z, right? So I try to be as intentional with being as clear as I can here. And I don't think I've done this before. Why haven't I done this before? I don't know, but I'm going to do it now. For the YouTube channel of the podcast, so YouTube lets me make playlists. And I find that feature very helpful when I'm navigating other people's content. And maybe the reason I didn't say it before is because season 1, like, I only had so many episodes, so like maybe there was like 1 episode in each playlist, and it wasn't like really like much of a thing. But now, as I continue podcasting and making more episodes and adding on to different series, just so you know, if you are interested in just looking at a certain series or seeing what playlists I've created so far, that's actually available on Hello Trauma Brain's YouTube channel. And you can subscribe there. You can check out the playlist without subscribing if you don't want to. And you can see, I think one of the bigger series so far is like the interviews. Like, all the interviews are in one place. We got conversations with friends. I just started recently the Things That the Narcissist Wrecked series. And today I want to start a brand new series, and this is going to be called Patient's Point of View. I have done several therapy modalities at this point, and often when I'm about to start a new modality, I like trying to find people that have experienced that modality and finding out what it was like for them. That helps me decide if it's something that I might resonate with or not. And I know I would find it so helpful if I could find a podcast episode or a video or something with a patient who's talking about the experience from their point of view to help clarify what the different modality is and how the patients experience them. So it recently dawned on me that I can be that person sharing what I have experienced so far from the patient side. And perhaps this can help you. I honestly didn't quite take in how many modalities I've done myself at this point that I can talk about. And yeah, I decided to go ahead and start these series. And before I go any further, again, a reminder that I am not an expert. I am not a therapist, and everyone has their own experience with different therapy modalities, and there is no one size fits all. In these series, I will try to share the nitty gritty, the pros and cons, my own experience. And please take this with not a grain, but with like a whole bucket of salt. You are the master of your own journey, and your experience may be very different from mine. So please keep that in mind. Now, I want to kick off the series with one of the modalities that I am doing at the moment, which is the relationship recovery process, also known as RRP. RRP, like I said in the intro, was created by Amanda Curtin, and it's been made famous really by her mentee, Patrick Tehan. And Patrick is very open about this. He basically was in one of Amanda's groups when he started his therapy journey. And from what he shares, I can tell that he was seeing her probably individually too. And after doing a group with Amanda, I think at one point I heard him say in an interview that he's even done the group, like repeated it a few times. And one of the times has been with his wife. And I know that Patrick and Amanda have been training other people in this modality as well. And Patrick is actually conducting research to make this an evidence-based modality for therapy. RRP, mostly I would consider it a modality for childhood trauma survivors. If you're trying to heal from dysfunctional family systems and having that trauma being created in a group setting when you were growing up, this might be a therapy modality to look into. From my understanding, on average, the members in the group can be up to 8 members. I will say for my RRP group, it was 7 of us. And there are 2 groups you do. So you have to go through the short-term group first, and that lasts about 6 months. And then you can do the long-term group, which can last, from my understanding, from 2 to 4 years. And it really depends on what the members of the group need. One thing to know about RRP is that it's past focused. So if you are ready to dive into your past experiences and try to start tangling, what happened, getting an understanding and language around it, help finishing business with the people that growing up were causing your trauma, like that's really what the focus of this group is. And if you have current an RP, they use the language of bumps like stuff that's happening now, that it's another word for bumps might be triggers. Like if you have some current bumps, triggers, or even crises that are really based on what's happening today, like right now in your life, I would say that probably you might need to consider doing individual therapy to work on that, because in the group, the focus is really going to be on the past, is not really talking about the present. And you might either have to do individual therapy to get that to a baseline level, or get it to come down in terms of the charge before you start an RP group, or you might need to do that alongside with being on the group, but you're doing an individual therapy separate. Definitely something to discuss with your therapist or someone you're considering if you're basically shopping around for an RP therapist and seeing what they think would be best for you. I will disclose how I did it. I did many years of individual therapy before joining my RRP group, and I did continue individual therapy alongside my RRP group. And I can say for myself, that's what worked the best for me, because I constantly have stuff coming on in the present, and the RRP group was helping a lot, but there's no way I could have just done the RRP and not have a place where I could address my present life and the crises that I experience. Clearly, still, like I just did this past week. So I'll share a few things that I guess I wish I would have known, and I just learned them as I went through the process. The first thing that happened to me was I had to do a phone call. It was a consultation phone call, and it lasted maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And the therapist is asking you questions about your background. And I became very aware in the call that I was not only interviewing them to see if they were a good fit for me, but they were also interviewing me to see if I was a good fit for the group setting, for that modality, and if it was a good, fit overall. And I have to say, I think once I became aware of that, a part of me, I think it triggered a bit of that part of me that is like, well, I want to pass. I want to get a good score on this. I want to be chosen. So definitely be mindful of that if that's something that could be, if that is one of those things that gets triggered for you when you feel like you might be also getting assessed for fit purposes. And remind yourself that, let's just say, like in my situation, I basically was, it was a good fit. Like we both felt like it would be for me. If for any reason, they were to recommend to you doing individual therapy first or doing some work before you start the group, I want to remind you that doesn't mean you got it wrong. It doesn't mean you failed the test. There is no test. It's really about catering this in a way where you have the resources, the mental bandwidth, and it's really about making sure that this work is going to be helpful and not detrimental. I think I wish I would have had someone tell me that ahead of time, so I would have gone into the call and not been like, oh my gosh, I need to pass. It would have been helpful to see it from the point of view of, we're trying to see if this is something that, this is the right time for it, or if I need to do something in order to be ready for it. And there is no right or wrong. So something that I don't think I could have ever been prepared for, and I don't think anyone who starts RRP is truly prepared for until they go through it, is the huge amount of grief that comes up. For me, especially those first few weeks, those first sessions, oh man, it was, I cried so much. I cried so intensely during the meetings and after the meetings, and to the point where like I had to do a call with my therapist. I was concerned. I was like, am I like this feels really intense. Like I feel like I'm triggering people and I don't want to do that. And something that was so helpful was he reminded me of, if someone was to get triggered by my crying, like that is giving them information about something they need to work on. And once I saw it that way, instead of I'm hurting someone with my crying, I could be potentially even helping them figure out what they need to heal. Once I saw it that way, it became easier to show up and just let the crying happen. It's definitely something to be aware of. It might not be what happens with you. You might start an RP group and you don't cry at all. And it definitely would depend on the person. But here are the things that I really liked about that modality, and they were green flags for me from the get-go. I like how transparent and clear the communication of what we're doing is going to be from the first session. Like the first session was learning about what we were going to do. There was a clear plan laid out in front of us. We went through the boundaries of the group. Like things just felt clear. I did not leave those first sessions thinking, am I allowed to do this? I'm not sure what we're doing in the next 6 months. I'm not clear. Like, no, it was very clear what we were supposed to be doing. That is such a green flag for a healthy system. Unhealthy systems, you would have started the 6-month group and nobody has any idea of what the hell is going to be happening next week. We didn't know exactly word by word, but we had a good expectation. Like that was definitely set from the beginning. Another thing that I liked hearing was that we could leave at any time. Toxic and abusive, narcissistic, again, insert the label that applies to you here, those types of systems tend to shame people for leaving. They tend to create this illusion of you can't leave. Like if you're here, you gotta stay. And staying means you're good and leaving means you're bad. That shame. If you like anyone who leaves, shun, shame, they're bad, we're not talking to them. And not the way it works here. Here, there were some suggestions around how to handle if you were thinking it might not be a good fit, like communicating with the therapist first, giving it a few sessions to have a process and see how you really feel about something instead of making a decision rationally. But the option was always there. I could have started the group and decided to leave a month in, and I could have done it, and that was allowed. Another thing that I liked about the short-term RRP group was that there was a slowing down on the interactions. So you're not allowed to interact with members outside of group during the short-term group. You're basically only supposed to see each other during meetings. And it's a weekly meeting. I don't think I mentioned that so far. So it's a weekly meeting, and that's the only time when we interact and see each other. And then in between, we're not contacting each other. What you can do is contact the therapist. I did that. But going back to the concept of slowing down the process of interacting with each other, I thought that was key, because in narcissistic relationships, it tends to be quick and fast and love bombing. And you join the group, and a weekend you've had like 20 calls, and each call lasts 4 hours, and you know everything there is about each other's trauma and what happened to you, and it's just so fast. And here it was not at all. Like in RP, I've noticed it goes back time and time again to creating a process to get to know people slowly. Keyword, slowly. Because when you slow it down, you have more time to really sit with how your body and your nervous system feels around this person. You can really develop a healthy opinion of them. And when it's fast, when it's too fast, you're so confused. You can't even put two and two together. Another thing I want to now talk about, these calls in between that you can have with your therapist if you need help. I remember the first time I had a call, and I want to say it was like right after the first session. So our RRP therapist was from the get-go very clear, like, you can reach out for support. That's allowed. We can have a call if you need in between sessions. I remember having to ask, like, is this free or not, because I wasn't sure. And it was part of it. It's part of what you paid for. And essentially, the calls have to be a reasonable amount of time. I can't just call and be like 4 hours in, right? But I remember really struggling with that first one. And I want to say it was after the first session, because I was so dysregulated, and I was crying so much, and I was so overwhelmed. And I just didn't know what the call meant. I didn't know if I was feeling depressed enough to be able to call. I was like, I was really second guessing myself. And what I decided to do was just reach out and say, I need help, but I don't know. Can you tell me more about what this looks like? I remember having that message exchange. And my RP therapist nailed it. And he really knocked it out of the park. I remember him messaging me, this is such a good way to show your inner kiddo what asking for help can look like. And how would it feel like if we just do a call so your inner kiddo can see an example of what this can look like? And I really like that. And I remember going into the call and leaving it with a better understanding of, oh, that is what getting help means. And leaving that call feeling like, yeah, I definitely needed it. That's the thing. For me, asking for help, and I need to be in such a bad place to ask for help. And if I am feeling horrible, but maybe I can manage on my own, should I really be asking for help? Still working on that. But those times where I asked for help, and I got the help, and I realized after it was done that I actually needed that a lot. And it was one of those things you don't realize you need it till you get it, and you're like, wow, I really needed that, are really helpful and very healing. So I won't, go into detail into these categories, but basically there's two things that get covered during the short-term group. The first part of the short-term group is psychoeducation and childhood trauma. And this is where I was crying my eyes out like hell. You learn about triggers, childhood trauma, emotional flashback management, the Children's Bill of Rights, which I've heard so many times now, more than once. And every time I hear those, it's like it hits me like it's the first time I hear it. It's wild. There's more to the psychoeducation, but you really start understanding how much you didn't get when you're going through that phase. And I think that's what really triggered a lot of grief for me. We all struggle with the was it that bad, and doing the short-term group has not cured that 100%. But during the short-term group, during that psychoeducation, you start to realize how bad it is, and how much worse, honestly, how much worse it was in my case. Man. Again, I don't think there's anything that I can say here that can fully prepare you for that part of the group. But what I can say is expect it. And if it hits you hard, I think that's normal. And if how it hits you does not look on the outside like this big crying thing, that's also data. And that also means something. And there's no right or wrong way. The second part of the RRP group is the genograms. There's genogram presentations, and for those of you that are not aware of what a genogram is, it's basically a toxic family tree where you draw up your tree and you're talking about the abusive, toxic dynamics. And I still struggle with this. When I present my genogram, I tend to be very I almost sound like a news anchor, doing the weather report or something, or talking about this article. And I'm very fact-based, and you're supposed to present it from the perspective of the impact it had on on the kid, on your younger self. And it's a hard one. It's a hard part of the group, and it's a significant part of the group. I had presented my genogram before this group with other people and other therapists. Still, it's a daunting experience to present it to the group because you're still getting to know each other, especially depending on when you present your genogram, if you're, first or one of the first ones or one of the last ones. And then you also get to hear the other people's. And I definitely felt like that was the part of the group when I started to get to know them and I allowed them to get to know me. And it's a wild experience. It really is. And there's something about feeling seen from that experience and seeing other people that's, again, very, very healing. During a short-term group, you can also expect to see these open group sessions, and those are the weeks where we don't do a genogram presentation, we don't talk about the childhood trauma like psychoeducation, or no new things are getting introduced. Is literally an open group where we're all talking about, how are we doing so far? And we can ask questions and kind of have more of an open conversation. And our therapist can, answer some things and provide some support and guidance to help process this stuff so far. And something I liked about that was that sometimes it happened organically. And I have to say our RRP therapist is very good at picking up when we need an open group, like an impromptu one. Something that allows it to happen is how the meetings are structured. So you start with the check-in, and we all get to check in at the beginning briefly to talk about how we're doing with the work. And then there's a checkout at the end of the meeting where we get to briefly talk about how that session kind of landed for us. And those check-ins are, I feel like that's the key nugget, like the therapist gets to hear how everybody's doing. And it's a lesson on attunement. That's really what it is to me, because I don't think I got a lot of good attunement where the people around me could pick up and notice, things and point them out and explore them, and hear to see, we'll call it the authority figure, which can be very triggering, right? And that's part of why this modality can be so healing, because you're seeing a healthy authority figure, a healthy leader, actually paying attention to everybody in the group. And they don't just gloss over when someone's struggling. They don't go like, well, we're going to act like I didn't hear that part. Like, they actually go, sounds like you all need to process something. How about we do an open group? And it gets. And that's another thing. He is very good at throwing that onto the table, but it's not from a place of, oh, I think you need an open group, so we're going to do an open group. I say, I'm picking up that I think we might need an open group. How do you feel about it? And then we're all nodding, and it's like, okay, we're going to do an open group, and then we do the open group. It's just wild. And it's funny. I noticed it. I would notice it when it happens, but I don't think I fully processed that until now as I'm talking about it here. That leads me into just saying, so far, I have done talk therapy. That's the one that I've done for the longest. EMDR, somatic experiencing, trauma-focused therapy, exposure a little bit that I have not done so much with a therapist like right alongside me, and then RRP. And in my experience, the modality that has helped the most with my childhood trauma is RRP. There's something about this group therapy modality. And I think this is especially true if your trauma was created in groups, in a group setting, either one or several group settings. There's something about doing group therapy that allows for those group wounds to come to the surface to start addressing them. And another thing that I like about it is that it allows for that relational healing. There's an element of attunement, validation. Honestly, it's hard to describe it sometimes. You kind of have to experience it. And I promise you, I did not get paid to say this. I did not get asked to do this episode. I'm just sharing it because I feel like this modality is a game changer, honestly. And I truly believe in spreading the word about this being an option especially for childhood trauma survivors. And another thing that I like about this modality is that it recognizes complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And that, let me tell you, is key. If your therapist does not understand what CPTSD and they're not open to learning more about CPTSD, I'm going to raise a red flag about that, because CPTSD is a thing. And if it doesn't get recognized and properly acknowledged, the treatment won't look the same. And I can say that from experience. The experience I've had with therapists who were not talking about CPTSD is very different from the experiences I've had with therapists that understand CPTSD. It's a huge difference, and complex PTSD is not the same as PTSD. It's just not. And if you are new to these terms and you have not heard the episodes I've made on season 1 about CPTSD, I'll link them to the show notes, because it's really important to create awareness about complex PTSD and what it is, what causes it, and how to treat it. Now, I want to talk about some of the things that were challenging. And quite frankly, I was thinking about talking about this in terms of pros and cons, but as I am sitting here, that doesn't quite feel right, because that kind of gives the implication that there's positives and negatives. And I don't like that, because my positives and negatives, quote unquote, or my pros and cons could be, vice versa for somebody else. So instead, let me change this language. And so far, I think I've discussed a lot of the things that I found beneficial for me. So let me share some of the challenges that I've had with RRP. One of the challenges that I've had with it is how much it costs. It can be expensive. It definitely rattled my budget and I had to move things around to make it work. And it is one of those things where if life was fair, my abusers would be reimbursing me for all the money I have spent in therapy, but that's not my reality. It's been out of pocket for me pretty much the whole time. And I want to go ahead and offer creativity as an option, because I feel like becoming creative has helped me take a lot of steps that I wouldn't otherwise. And Patrick Tehan has a community where he shares a lot of the elements of RRP work there. He has YouTube videos where he's sharing components of RRP, and the videos on YouTube are free, so you can definitely benefit from those without joining a group. His community costs less than what the RRP group costs a month, so that's another option you can use. Now, that being said, I will admit, And I can speak from doing the YouTube videos. I can speak from doing Patrick's Healing Community for over a year. Not anymore. I had to cut it back so I could go into the long-term group. And I can speak from doing the short-term group. And from my humble perspective, I will admit that the group is its own thing. There is no replacing the group. There are alternative ways to get some of these resources if the resources and the money and finding a therapist is not available to you right now. But it won't 100% replace being in a group with a therapist that's working with you in between one-on-one when you need it. It won't replace, you and these group members going through this process together with someone guiding you through it. Like, not 100% substitution, but it doesn't mean that you cannot benefit from some of the RRP resources that are available for people that cannot join a group right now. And the next challenge with RRP is finding an RRP therapist that can see you. Like, in the US, we have a bit of a problem with this whole therapists can only practice in the state that they're licensed in. All the states have different license requirements, and all that basically what it means is, there could be an RRP therapist in Massachusetts that could see someone in Pennsylvania virtually, but if they're not licensed in Pennsylvania, they won't be able to see you. And for a while, I was looking and looking and looking, and every RRP therapist was licensed in other states, not in Pennsylvania, and that sucked. And this is another moment where I want to throw again that being creative, quite frankly, I feel like a lot of this work can depend on that sometimes. And for me, it looked like this. So Patrick on his website has a list of RRP therapists, and actually RRP therapists also have like an Instagram account, so you can see therapists in there, and if you go into their websites, you can find out where they practice. And here's a little pro tip, especially for those of you that are in the US. You can treat with an RRP therapist internationally. Like, if they're not in the US, they can actually see you. And alongside with that option, there's some challenges that come from that. And one of them is whether or not that would be covered by the insurance that you have if you've been using insurance to do your therapy. Like, it gets a little bit more complicated when they're international. It depends on what country they're from. And that's something that I realize I'm adding another thing to your list of looking into. But, these are things to think about and that you would have to look into if you choose to go internationally. Full disclosure, I did. I went international. My RRP therapist is not in the US. And what that means for me is that my sessions are on Tuesday mornings at 6 a.m. You heard that right. And I'm not going to lie. Some weeks, that early morning hurts. It works for me at 6 a.m. because it allows me to do the therapy outside of my work hours. But it also means that I'm going to work right after finishing RP, which some weeks, especially when I started, was hard. So I've been crying for an hour and a half. Oh, that's another thing I did not say. The sessions last an hour and a half. They're an hour and a half long. At least the ones that I did. Yeah, an hour and a half of on and off crying. And I have like a little bit, like a few minutes to kind of sit with it and compose myself. And then I have to get ready and go to work. Like, it's hard. It's hard. They have no clue. And that was a wild experience. Like, you show up to work and a part of me would be like, these people have no idea that I just went through all this like 2 hours ago. And I'm here now. And it's a miracle that I'm functioning, but I am. I want to talk about that for a moment. At the beginning, it was really hard, but there's something about RRP as you keep doing it and you start healing it, and all of a sudden you are able, and this also happened alongside with the individual therapy that I was doing, you become able to show up to your life in a more present and functional way. So I did start noticing that I was more productive at work. I was communicating better at work. Also in my life, like in other aspects. And I will say, like, those times, those benefits, they might be like a small thing, but for me is huge. So I finished my RRP short-term group towards the end of August. And now I actually went into my long-term group. So I will not talk about my long-term group. For a few reasons. I just started it not too long ago. And I will say at the end of our RP short-term group, another thing that happened that I loved was the fact that we got to have modeling around saying goodbye. And it wasn't a permanent goodbye. We actually all have chosen and have started now our long-term RP group. And I will not be talking about it today, because I just started it, so I can't really speak too much about something that I don't know very well yet. But going back to that goodbye, it was a beautiful thing to have like a goodbye that had a process, and there were questions that we reflected on ahead of time when we showed up. And it blew my mind because I want to bring back a piece I talked about earlier, which was I was so concerned when I started RP about triggering people and hurting them with my crying. And one of the feedbacks that I got from a bunch of the members was how them seeing me cry helped them, by seeing the modeling of healthy expression of sadness and grief and crying. And it blew my mind when I heard it. I was just like, what? You don't know. Like, I was so concerned that I might not be able to be in group because I was triggering everybody. And I was actually helping them by modeling crying and grieving what had happened to us. Hello, trauma brain. Let me tell you, my brain always goes into, it's gotta be me, I'm doing something wrong. Not, this could potentially help somebody. Wild. What I will say about the long-term group is one of the key differences between the short-term and the long-term group, which is now in the long-term group, we're actually encouraged to hang out and interact outside of group, which, oh my gosh. Oh, wild experience, let me tell you. It's, I feel like I've been waiting so long to be able to do this, to have access to all these people now outside of group. And it surprised me to see myself freezing and being hesitant to interact. And I think part of it is I'm scared. I'm scared that I will fuck it up, that I will get triggered. I'm scared that it might cause problems, or I don't know. I actually, wait, maybe I do. I think I'm scared of that intimacy, you know? Like, not only am I getting to know them better, they're getting to know me better. What if they hate me? You know? And what if I get it wrong? What if I get in trouble? So stay tuned. I will continue my work with that modality, and as I make progress, I'll let you know how it is. For any of you that are considering it and want to learn more, you don't have to wait for me to tune in after I've done enough work in the long-term group to be able to speak about it. I will be sharing a few things that you can check out if you want to learn more about RP. First thing is going to be an interview that Patrick Tehan did with his mentor and the creator of RP, Amanda Curtin. And I'll link that interview in the show notes. And the second resource I'm going to link is actually 2 episodes from season 1 of Hello Trauma Brain. I happened to interview a RP therapist, Gabrielle Marchant, and we were talking about recovering from childhood trauma on episodes 23 and 24. And Gabrielle did talk about RP, and you can definitely check those 2 episodes out. And I will also link those to the show notes. So I want to check in with you for a moment, and I'm curious to hear what you think of this episode. If you find it helpful, feel free to leave a comment. That's something I have not been encouraging to do. I say reach out to me, but you can do that, and you can also leave a comment. And I want to let you know that the way you can do that is Spotify now has comments available. If you're listening on YouTube, that has the comment section open as well. And I want to say those might be the only 2 places that I am aware of that allow comments on episodes. And also the Instagram page, when I do the sound bites. Feel free to leave on the comments there. What did you think about this Patient's Point of View series starter? Are you curious about RRP? Have you done RRP? Is there anything that I got wrong? Anything that, if you've done this modality, that you experienced that you want to share? I honestly think that us sharing our experiences can help people that are considering these modalities. It can bring awareness to the option of these modalities being out there and help someone find something that works for them potentially. So feel free to add on anything that you've experienced if you've done a short-term group. And if you have any questions, I might not be able to answer them, but feel free to leave them. And if I am, I will try to. And if I can't, I hope that you will check out the resources on the show notes. And I will be linking the RP therapist Instagram page as well. So I invite you to practice reaching out and asking for more information. So I think that wraps up my personal experience of doing a 6-month short-term relationship recovery process group. In this week's healing invitation, I want to offer you a few things to reflect about. Was your trauma created in a group? If so, how are the dynamics in the groups you belong to now? Are they similar? How so? Different? In which ways? Have you been isolating and these questions sound irrelevant right now? The answers to these questions might give you a hint on where to focus your healing next. If anything about RRP has piqued your interest, I do invite you to check out the resources linked to the show notes to learn more. Please let me know how this week's healing invitation goes if you choose to accept it. Before we wrap up this episode, all music and production is courtesy of yours truly. Also, I want to share a few ways you can help support this podcast. You can subscribe and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or the platform you are using to listen. Share this episode with anyone you think can benefit from this content. Follow Hello Trauma Brain on Instagram, subscribe to the Hello Trauma Brain YouTube channel, like this video, and hit the notification bell to be the first to know when I post a new episode. And you can make a donation by getting me a coffee. No worries, all links will be provided in the show notes. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you found this episode helpful. I wish you the best as you continue your healing journey. It is time for our farewell affirmations. I invite you to repeat after me. I welcome the belief that I am enough. I am lovable. And I deserve to heal. I wish you a gentle week and thank you for your presence.